and along with me on the committee are Reverend Middleton, Mr. Kowalski, and Mr. Werman. I think I'm going to turn it over to Christine to introduce our presenter, Ms. Durant.
Thank you, Ms. Honeycutt. Ms. Smalls is actually going to give us a quarterly update as we've scheduled for the Housing Committee. And then after she's finished, we can take the second agenda item separately.
You want to approve the minutes?
Oh, yeah, let's jump on that first. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
Move to approve. Second. Third.
Seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Now we'll turn it over to Ms. Smalls.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. I'm here to provide an update on the county's affordable housing programs and initiatives for the second quarter of 2024. Today, I will highlight the Critical Home Repair Program, the Charleston Homes Program, gap financing and infill development, the Wells Septic Tank and Utility Connections Program, and the Land Acquisition Program. Let's start with the Critical Home Repair Program. Over the last 6 months, the program saw the repair to 39 homes, and they completed 15 weatherization insulation packages for the senior citizens in our community. Please note that at the Finance Committee meeting tonight, there is an additional agenda item requesting the approval to allocate the remaining $1 million, and this will allow us to continue the program through the end of through 2026. The Charleston Homes Program. Here you see Councilman Boykin and DCA Duran at the groundbreaking ceremonies on the Charleston Homes project on Garrison Street in Johns Island. The woman in the picture will actually be the homeowner for the home. And as many of you are aware, with the Charleston Habitat program, the homeowner puts in sweat equity. So she was out there on the groundbreaking ceremonies, so we had a chance to meet her. During the Finance Committee meeting, there will also be an opportunity for Council to approve the award of 6 more homes. At this point, once those homes are awarded, we will have 5 more homes. So we went from 16, and now we're finally down to 5. That application process should start in September, early October. So we're making progress on this program. The Gap Financing Infill Program. You're all aware that you had allocated $20 million. Just wanted to remind you that the $20 million will produce 737 rental units and 56 home ownership rentals. During the first 2 quarters, Archer School Apartments and the Northbridge Townhomes had their grand openings. So there are individuals now living in those 2 apartment communities, and I think that's an accomplishment that we should all be proud of. As we look forward to the future, just lots of fun times, more groundbreaking and grand opening ceremonies to attend. So this program is moving along very well. I consider the Wells Septic Tank and Utilities Connection Program our flagship project. We've had this program for a while. During the first 2 quarters, we replaced 28 wells. We replaced 13 septic tanks, and in Snowden, we connected 2 sewer systems. And so this program is going to continue moving the way it has for many years. To give you a quick update on the Snowden, we spoke with Mount Pleasant Water Works, and they started the solicitation for a construction company yesterday. And so their plans is that the project will begin in November of 2024. Finally, we have our Land Acquisition Grant Program. As you may remember or recall, you allocated $2.5 million for this program in February. Staff has started working with the Charleston Redevelop Corporation to develop the program, and they're also going to help us with the operations of this particular grant program. Application period started in August, and it ends on September 13th, and we anticipate bringing you the list of award recommendations in November. This quickly ended our quarterly update for the housing programs and incentives. Are there any questions?
Members, Council, Mr. Pryor.
Is Allwood Street one of those houses that's going to be up for sale in the next round? Because I keep getting calls from that lady over there, and,
Yes,
I keep telling her we're doing the best we can, and she goes to neighborhood meetings and then she blasts the county again. So
I know who you're speaking of. I received calls also, and yes, it is in the last phase.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Boykin.
Yes.
Ms. Smalls, just a quick question. The recent
record flooding down on the Edison River and the Parkers Ferry, Willtown communities. Many of them had damaged wells and maybe some septic tanks and drain fields as well. Would those residents be potential applicants for our well and septic tank program?
Yes, sir, if they're low to moderate income individuals. We still have a backlog of applicants, so we would have to, they wouldn't be in the front of the program, but we will be able to
Certainly
accept
understand.
applications. Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
ma'am.
Any others? Well, I'll start with Mr. Moody and then Reverend Middleton.
Just a couple comments and a question. Amazing work. I continue to be pleasantly surprised at how this process is going along. We're not growing government, but we're reaching out to partners that know this space. We're working with them and monitoring them very closely. It's a great setup. My question was the repairs, the 39 repairs. Are these all over the county? I mean, there's so much need all over the county. I don't know if we were isolated in North Charleston, which is fine, but I just was curious if we're trying to move this work around the county so that all areas are getting some help.
Yes, sir. We received, I don't know if you remember, we received 1,100 applications, and we're using a blind draw process.
Okay.
So we randomly select
Probably best
a
you
group
do.
at a
That's fine.
time. Yes, sir. So.
Thank you.
Reverend Middleton?
Thank you so much, Ms. Vice Chairwoman and Chairperson of this committee, and thank you so much for the presentation. So if approved tonight, the additional funds that will take you to 2026, so more individuals within the county who need home repairs and that sort of thing, another round will be open for them to apply.
No, sir. We received over 1,100 applications.
Oh, so you have
And yes,
some-
sir.
okay.
Yes, sir.
So
We will
no
not
new-
be able to.
no new people.
Yes, sir. No new applications. But you are correct. There is a need. We do get calls all of the time.
Mr. Kabrowski?
Chairman, I have a question on 2B. Is that premature to ask?
We're not quite there yet.
Okay, that'll wait. Thank you.
Any others on, yes, Mr. Werman?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Ms. Smalls, I would echo a lot of what Councilman Moody had to say. I'm really pleased with all the progress we've had and very much glad that the gap financing has been allocated. I wanted to check and see. I know that we were trying to switch a little bit from grants to, obviously low interest, but loans. Would that have been settled out now? I know we've awarded them to, but we would make, I don't know if there's an agreement to be determined. I'm just curious if we know, and if we can talk about what some of the terms of any revolving funds look like. How much of that do we expect to revolve? I assume the term on it wouldn't be anytime particularly soon, but that's still very encouraging. I just wanted to see if we had any details about how that went.
Yes, sir. So in phase one, we did do grants. Those were all grants. But as we moved into the phases 2, phases 3, and phases 4, we did change to revolving loans. So for the GAP projects, they are revolving loans. We're working with South Carolina Community Loan Fund, and they are working with the developers to find a balance with the repayment schedule and the interest rates.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's what I was maybe had a hunch on, that the repayment schedules haven't been set, but we know sort of basically how much we're allocating out that will be done as a revolving loan.
Yes, sir.
Whether the specific terms are, maybe not. That's to be determined, I guess.
As they sign the contracts,
Yeah.
that's when they determine the repayment plan and the interest rates. If I remember correctly, I think we have, I don't want to state for sure, but we have already completed a couple of the contracts.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing, if those fall into a pretty standard set of terms, if they all kind of typically look the same. I'd be interested in knowing what that is. But that's very encouraging because obviously, that means that we've got some groundbreakings to look forward to, but we've got some other awards obviously to look forward to further down the line when those do ultimately revolve back. So thank you again for all you've done on this. Thanks. I think this is a great presentation, and I think we're in a great place.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Smalls, thank you so much. You answered some tough questions, and we really have set the mold here with a self-perpetuating system that's going to be able to serve a lot of people. So thank you so much for what you do on this program.
Thank you.
If that's all for 2A, we'll move on to 2B. Ms. Durant?
Thank you, Ms. Honeycutt. Just for context, Council will remember, among all the other initiatives that you all have voted for housing, you also directed legal and the economic development staff to work to develop a multi-county park that could be used for the development of affordable housing. You all approved that, and it went through the third ordinance reading, I think, in December of last year. Since that time, we've been working on a policy that would actually allow us to set some programs and procedures up to apply these tax incentives. So what you're going to hear tonight is basically a summary of the policy of what's called a uniform tax exemption policy. What this does is it keeps the structure for how tax incentives and tax exemptions will be applied, and it begins the process of allowing us to accept applications in the next number of months, pending a few things we'll talk about, and then structure them in such a way that if we need to tweak the policy, we will be able to do so without having to amend the ordinance. So with that, Ms. Smalls is going to give you an update on the policy.
Thank you, DCA Durant. As Ms. Durant stated, staff has been working with Grow America to develop these 7 core elements for the uniform tax exempt policy. Because Charleston County staff loves coming up, we love coming up with acronyms. The acronym for this particular program, and as you go through it, is UTEP, Uniform Tax Exemption Policy. So today I'm going to discuss the policy structure that will guide staff in implementing the FELO program. So the policy provides guardrails. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. You have guardrails, and it helps direct staff on what we need to do and what we can do. But more importantly, it answers a couple of important questions. The first question is, what authorizes staff to implement the program? The second question is, what does a standard program look like for the county? The third element is, what types of financial assistance will the county issue? The fourth core element is, what happens if a real estate agent or developer wants to transfer his FELO? Also, how will we handle deviations and clawbacks during this process? And finally, it establishes an application process, and that application process will be similar to the ones that we've done with gap financing in Charleston Homes and the others. So these are the core elements of the UTIP, and I'm just going to go through them not in great details, but sort of a high level. Authorization, as DCA Durant explained, we got here based on council actions, some ordinances that were written, and then, of course, state laws that allowed us to set up this policy and to use multi-county parks and incentives for increasing affordable housing in Charleston County. Standard incentive program. What exactly is the standard incentive program? There are 2 guiding principles that go along with this policy. The first one is the but-for determination, and it simply says, but for this incentive, this particular project would not be able to offer affordable housing. The second principal idea or element of the policy is that at no point will we ever bring a project to council that will allow undue enrichment to a developer. And I think those are the 2 most important things that council has asked for us. The but-for, that if we weren't there to help, if we weren't there to fill the gap, if Charleston County wasn't there, the developer may not consider affordable housing. And of course, the second part is we do want to incentivize developers to provide housing, but we don't want to do it to the extent that we are unduly enriching them. So those are 2 guiding principles behind the policy. The third element of the policy is, what type of projects are we looking at? The policy has standards, and the 2 standards are the types of projects you're used to: residential rental projects and mixed-use projects. Those are projects we've been talking about for a couple of years now, and we're familiar with them. But the policy also allows for us to look at other types of projects that may be out there that we've never heard of. So the policy is flexible enough to let us consider projects that may come to the county that are brand new ideas, brand new concepts. Transfers. We all know that at some point in time, property will exchange hands from one owner to the next owner. And how are we going to handle the FELO? So this policy sets up a mechanism that provides a standard for evaluating a transfer that may come to us, because we do expect transfers during this process. The first 4 things that we were talking about were the standards that are set in the policy. Now we have to look at mechanisms that we've put into place to do other things. So for example, deviations. We want to have policy that's flexible enough to allow us to look at different types of policies that are different from the ones that we're used to seeing. So let's look at an example. Let's say there's a developer and he's presenting a project to the county that's going to create housing, affordable housing at the 50% AMI. And in addition to that, this particular project that he's proposing is right along the transit. So that's a really good project, and that's one we would really consider doing. The standard may not include those types of elements, but the deviation will allow us to include those elements as we're trying to decide on the incentive package that we're going to create. Council, you have to understand that there's a lot out there that we're still learning. And so as we put this policy together, we couldn't put every single example out there. So we wanted to have the flexibility so that if we deviate from the standard, there's something there that keeps us aligned in how that deviation will occur and what we will allow. Clawbacks. You guys are familiar with clawbacks based on the deals that come out of economic development. We've included clawbacks in those projects for years. But our clawbacks are going to be based on the compliance agreements that are written, that we write with the developers. So let's assume, well, let me start by also saying that staff will go out every year and audit the projects, look at what they're doing, compare the performances that they've provided to us, that information, compare it to the actual agreement that they've signed to make sure they're all in alignment. But if during that evaluation, if during that annual review, we realize that they're in violation of their agreement, we will work with legal to determine what clawbacks are needed. So the clawbacks are here to protect the county and the county's investments in these individual policies. So we sort of quickly went through the core elements of the policy, but what I really want to do now is to stop a second, take a pause, and let's look at the policy in its basic form. And as you can tell, I sort of highlighted the important words. So first of all, this policy is a standard incentive program that will increase affordable housing in Charleston County. It is similar to economic development. This isn't something new. It's just a standard incentive program that we've been doing for years. This policy, though, has two guiding principles. The first one is but for. But for this incentive provided by Charleston County, this project will not produce affordable housing. And in addition to that, it says that it will work to ensure that we never present a project to council that will unduly enrich the developer in that project. The policy outlines the different types of projects that we can have. We can have mixed use, we can have residential, but it allows us to bring new ideas, new concepts to Charleston County. So it allows for the potential of new projects to come to Charleston County and that we can evaluate them and provide incentives for those projects. There is a mechanism in place to handle transfers. There is a mechanism that addresses deviation, and the policy does include language, clawback language, and those are all important elements of the policy. There is an application policy or an application procedure, and as I said, it will follow what we have been doing now, at least since I've been there, 1.5 years, where we have applications come in, we evaluate the applications, we come to council with a recommendation, and council will approve every single incentive that we recommend to you before we actually allow the incentive to go to the developer. But finally, and perhaps the most important part, or one of the elements that makes this work for us, is that the policy that you're going to approve tonight and the incentives that may result from this policy will always be consistent to the Housing Our Future plan that you adopted. And also, although it isn't written here, it is always going to align with the county council's strategic plan. So that's sort of the uniform tax exemption policy in a nutshell. And tonight we're asking that you will approve this policy that will allow for the use of financial tax incentives in the development of affordable housing. So are there any questions?
Anybody on council have questions? Mr. Werman?
Thank you again, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for this, Ms. Smalls. I guess I do have a couple of questions here. When you say the standard incentive program, is that basically saying that are you saying that, and maybe it's both, the standard of what you get as a developer when you get some tax relief under this program, or is it a standard as to what you give in terms of, X percentage affordable at X AMI for Y number of years. Does it cover all of that or some of that, or
So when
what's
I'm-
sort of included in that? And I'd be curious about what it is, if it can be summarized at least.
For me, I think the best way to look at it is the Housing Our Future plans sort of explained to us, or it detailed where their need was. And that need for affordable housing was across the AMIs. So we wouldn't necessarily have a standard that's particular to the AMI. And we wouldn't also have a standard that says that every single project that comes through is going to be a 10% or a 20% or a 30%. We wanted to have the flexibility. Remember, the second guiding rule is that we're never going to unduly enrich a developer. So by having a standard, that's where we start, but we can deviate or make changes along the way. So in theory, there is a standard, it's the starting ground, but decisions will be made based on the projects and proposals that come to us to review.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'm just trying to maybe understand sort of like what is the standard? I mean, I realize that we can, adjust it, and I think that's appropriate, by the way, to be able to deviate from it as, unique opportunities present themselves. But I guess do we have like sort of an idea of what the, maybe typical project like this would look like in terms of term and affordability, and frankly also in terms of how much tax relief they're going to get, or?
At this point, we're working with Grow America, and the unique thing of the way we're handling this is we're partnering with Grow America, the company, our consultants, and as the applications come to us, we may be able to better define those different things, but at this point, we're looking at the projects with fresh eyes that come to the county, and the standard is basically the types. So if you have a residential, mixed use, that's sort of the basic where we start when we're looking at the projects.
Gotcha. Okay. I think, well, you said something else that intrigued me in talking about it in terms of applications. When I picture what sort of standard economic development does, I think more of sort of bilateral negotiations. But if we've got sort of applications, that's one of the things that gives me a lot of assurance, when we talk about our gap financing, because there is a competition going on here. And so, obviously I know y'all are going to be keeping a close eye on that sort of but-for requirement and making sure no one's sort of unduly enriched. But I think just the fact that if I'm making an application and I know another guy, can maybe pencil out 20 more units for, 10 more years of term of affordability, he's probably going to get that incentive, maybe more so than I am. So, I mean, that certainly is encouraging. I guess, if I'm understanding it right. Am I understanding that right?
You are, that's
Okay.
correct. Applications encourage competition.
Okay, very good. Yeah, okay, well, it seems to me, and maybe we do this with the gap financing as well, but I really view these as pretty similar programs, frankly, but it seems like, I know we've got a standard that may be pretty undefined at this point, but I could see, is this something that can be revisited? It sounds like it is.
Yes, that's our
Okay.
plan. So we're still with Grow America, they're our consultants, and we're going to do a couple of the projects with them in the beginning. And as we move forward, I anticipate that we may come back and revise the policy.
Yeah,
And so, as we learn more, we change things and we do things better. And so, yes, we will probably come back with, and we may not, but we are working with the consultants in the beginning on the first handful of projects.
Well, I think that's, I think the way I could see this moving forward is that there would be some revisiting, even periodically, with the idea that, we always want to know what we're getting back depending on what we put out. I've had to learn a lot about the LIHTC program, and there's the QAP. I would hope that maybe we could use these standards in a similar way to that, where, if we want to tweak and we want to encourage stuff closer to transit, we can kind of incorporate that into the standards a little bit more, or if we, want more term, whatever the sort of specific goals we would want to pursue. I think adjusting that on a periodic basis would give the program some added flexibility, but also kind of help the developers help set targets for the developers for what we want them to compete over. So, again, thank y'all for doing this. I'm really excited again to be getting multiple ways of approaching this issue kind of up off the ground and running.
Mr. Kabrowski?
Well, thank you very much for your hard work and your excellent presentation. I just have a few questions on the but-for and on the undue enrichment. I mean, most people that want to buy homes in Charleston County, they may be slightly above the affordable, what qualifies them, but many would buy homes but for the price. And we don't give them any tax incentives at all, and we're giving developers tax incentives. And who are the people that decide what undue enrichment is and what are the standards for that? I mean, who are the individuals, what group, and what standards do they use to decide what is unjudged enrichment for people who are already getting tax incentives that when people want to buy homes, and again, I emphasize, but for the price, they could buy a home. And they may have two people working, they may be afford above the limits, and how do you determine that? Who are the people and what are the standards?
The Housing Our Future plan, the Council's Housing Our Future plan, the strategic plan, will help us in making those decisions. We're working with the partner, the consultants, Grow America, and Charleston County staff.
Well, tell us again, because it's a public hearing, who is Grow America and who are the people on that? Are they the ones that are going to decide with tax incentives that's money from everybody in Charleston County, and certain people are getting tax incentives that others don't? And I think any time that is done, we need to know who are the actual people making those decisions.
Grow America is the consultants that we have been working with throughout this process, and then the others are the county staff members.
Grow America again, who are they and where are they from?
Grow America is a company. They have done work across the country. We've learned more about them because they've started recently, in recent years, working in the upstate.
Well, my point is that, again, I thank you for your hard work and the fact that people, as a result of your hard work, will be able to have homes that they couldn't have otherwise is a great thing. But I want to make it clear from what I hear is we're outsourcing then what the decision of undue enrichment means with tax incentives to people that the average person can't get in here, but we're outsourcing that. The use of tax incentives, who decides what is unjust or not? That elected officials aren't making that. We're outsourcing that to a private entity. I don't know what connections they have or what, I couldn't vote for something despite all the good things you're doing if I don't know who is deciding that or how they're deciding those unjudged enrichment. There's no standards that you're telling me, and we have no control over that apparently.
Mr. Kabrowski, I think the appropriate thing to do would be to inquire of staff, maybe set up a meeting. I'm sure they can give you all the information you would like. Mr. Moody?
Well, I'm not done. I understand that, but I have a right, it's a public meeting, respectfully, to ask those questions. I think we're using tax incentives and we're having standards of unjust enrichment. I was just asking the question. I feel those were legitimate questions, but thank you.
I do want to add, though, that county council has the ultimate decision because we bring every incentive package back to the council for approval.
Mr. Pryor?
She just said what I was going to tell Ms. Kabrowski. We the last person that's going to make that decision. Everything comes back to us for a vote. Thank you, Ms. Smalls.
Mr. Moody?
I was going to follow up a little bit on both Mr. Worman and Mr. Kabrowski. I agree a little bit with Mr. Kabrowski. I'm fine sending it through finance, but it does seem a little subjective to me about undue. I get the concept of undue enrichment. I get it, but who decides that? So I might want to learn a little bit more too. So if y'all set something up, I'd like to know a little bit more how that's scored. Who makes the judgment of that? Because somebody's not going to do this project unless there's some money to be made on it. So, but how much is it to be made on it? That's how do we score that? That's what I'm looking for. Transfers. Do the transfers not stay with the property? Okay, so when I saw qualified buyers, what was the phrase you had in there? I mean, can y'all get in the way of somebody selling a property because it's tied to an incentive?
No, sir, we would just be able to adjust the incentive if that's
Okay,
needed.
if they're already unduly rich.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I guess the scoring I really wanted to talk about too, maybe follow up Mr. Worman's point. It kind of reminds me a little bit about maybe how the municipalities, we judge their sidewalk. So if it connects sidewalks, if it's close to a bus stop, if it's is it sort of the same mindset there? If it checks more of these boxes, it's going to score higher and get a better ship? Thank you.
exactly it.
Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Still have a question? All right. Anybody else on that? Excellent. Thank you again. Appreciate it, Ms. Smalls and Ms. Durant. We're doing a lot of good things, and I view this second presentation that was just the policy that we're looking at. There is no adoption of any sort of specific project or.
No.
Okay.
Just the policy.
Great. All right. Thank you. I think that our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Welcome to our Finance Committee meeting. First item, approval of minutes, August 13th.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Mr. Moody.
Mr.
Any questions? Any questions?
Ms. Ham?
Mr. Chairman, I think maybe we're supposed to vote on
Yes. Oh, we
something.
were
This
supposed
is
to
the
take
indication
action?
I'm
Okay.
getting.
Oh, well,
I apologize. So y'all wanted an action on 2A and 2B, or just?
Okay.
It looks like 2B.
There's a request to approve on 2B.
Yeah, I think
If the rules of council dictate from the Housing Committee, if the committee approves, it will go to Finance for full consideration.
Right.
So yes, a vote of the Housing Committee.
Do I hear a motion on item 2B?
second?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Any opposed?
Well, I still would like to meet and discuss it a little bit more, I think. This is the uniform tax.
So I think that's 6-2. So the motion carries. It will come to council Tuesday. Thank you.
Well, I couldn't vote because we're
Oh,
not
you
on the
can't.
committee. Only committee members can vote.
Oh, gosh, sorry.
So I have an aye from
Not gonna
Mr.
move out of
Gorman,
committee.
Mr. Fass, Ms. Honeycutt, and then I have a nay from Kabrowski and Middleton. So it'll go to Finance tonight
Got it.
for further discussion.
Okay. Back to approval of the minutes of August 13th. Moved and seconded. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank
For
you.
approval on 2A, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr.
Mr. Boykin, would you handle the climate plan?
It's just a presentation.
I'm doing the introduction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Make the introduction, correct?
If I may take a point of personal privilege real quick. I had the privilege and pleasure to serve on the Resilience and Sustainability Committee as the county council representative. I just want to take a moment to recognize a few folks that are present here. I wanted to thank Mr. Walt Smalls, our DCA for General Services, Ms. Karen Green, our Director of Safety and Risk Management, and Ms. Christine DeStefano, a DCA Project Officer, for their work in putting this climate action plan together at a staff level and working with us on the meetings and everything. And I also want to recognize our chairman, Mr. Stuart Weinberg, who's here tonight, who has done a great job leading us into this effort. And at this point, as a means of an introduction, we're ready to receive a presentation from Mr. Yule Herbert, and he's from Sustainability Solution Group, SSG, which is our firm for developing the proposed county climate action plan. And by way of history on this, in 2021, council directs staff to develop a proposed climate action plan for the county. Funding was budgeted in FY23. The RFP was awarded on August 15th, 2022. An amount of $2,071,810 was budgeted, of which $229,610 went to SSG, and the $42,200 remaining balance went to ASACO, Community Engagement, which is a subcontractor. And the proposed climate action plan consists of the following: 5 big moves, 11 strategies, 53 proposed action items that will be utilized in the meeting the goals of the plan. And this time I'll introduce you to Mr. Yule Herbert. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here again today, and I'd like to acknowledge that the same people that you listed off contributed a lot of wisdom and insights to the development of this plan, as well as many others. So today I'll go through the process, some of the engagement that we undertook, some of the modeling results, the implementation strategy, a progress update, and some recommendations and next steps. So we are a climate action planning firm. We're about 44, 45 employees. We've been working in this space for 20 years, and we've worked on more than 100 climate action plans across North America with jurisdictions of all sizes, from very small to very large. For this project, we also worked with Civics, a firm that specializes in program development and implementation, and a SECO group who supported the local community engagement process. So it's a unique moment, and why do I say that? And why is it particularly interesting to develop a climate action plan right now? Firstly, Charleston County, like many other places around the world, is feeling the impacts of climate change, and these may occur directly in the environment through increased storms, increased rain, changing mix of plants and animals, and rising sea levels. Those have impacts on the economy, through property construction, change in people's livelihoods, and increased energy costs. They also have impacts on health through increased heat exposure, which has impacts on people's, makes illnesses more severe, water contamination, change in disease regimes from insects, for example, mosquitoes and ticks, and then also mental health issues like climate anxiety, which are becoming more and more pervasive. There is global consensus, and most countries around the world are working on climate change, which is important because it's a global issue and it's not something that any one entity can do on its own. But decisions today lock in patterns of emissions and energy consumption for a long time. So for example, a car that's purchased today locks in whatever fuel or energy that it uses for 10 to 18 years, which is the lifetime of that car. Or a building which is built locks in energy or emissions patterns of consumption for 70 to 80 years. So those decisions have long-lasting consequences and really enable or disable our ability to make decisions in the future. And that's really the value of a plan. But of particular note is two federal acts, the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which provide $783 billion plus $1.2 trillion of investment, much of which is directed to climate actions. And so those investments are available to households, to counties, to municipal governments, and to states if they're seized, and indeed many people are engaging in those incentives right now, and there's a lot of opportunity going forward. The state is also very active on this file, issuing a priority climate action plan this spring. It's also received Solar for All funding, which will help stimulate more solar uptake. It's looking at a retrofit funding program for commercial buildings in the legislature. And it's developing a home energy score program, as well as supporting emerging wind and EV manufacturing industries across the state. So this is very much part of the economic agenda within the state. What does a climate action plan do? First of all, it demonstrates leadership. It also describes detailed actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and you'll see those described in the report. But most importantly, it identifies economic development opportunities. And this is really the new paradigm of climate action. It's really an economic development agenda. But I think that a unique lens that the county also brings, and most climate action plans, is how to ensure that everyone benefits from this energy transition that is very much underway. And we saw, for example, the International Energy Agency today or yesterday released a report that said the investment in clean energy reached $2 trillion last year, which was significantly more than any other energy type. So this is a transition that's rapidly gaining momentum. So how do we go about building a climate action plan in Charleston County? This is the schedule from March 2023 till today. We basically built a model of the county's energy system and other factors which drive emissions. So we looked at how transportation works, the building stock, where energy comes from, the electricity system, actions that can be taken to change those. And then we built future scenarios, a business as usual scenario, what happens if nothing else changes, a low carbon scenario that looked at all the different actions that can be taken. And then we assessed the impacts of those scenarios on costs, capital and operating costs, on public health impacts, on equity, and all of that comes together in the final plan that you see before you. At each step of the way, we had engagement activities which would help guide the development of those scenarios, the identification of actions, the assessment of public health impacts. And so we also worked extensively with the committee, the CCAT, and the RSAC over the course of 7 meetings each to guide those, the analysis and support the engagement process. There are 4 different ways that you can interact with this plan. There's the long, detailed, full report, which is the one that's in the far left corner there. There's an executive summary, which gives you a quick snapshot. There's a summary of the actions, which is a 4-pager. And there's also an FAQ, which addresses some of the questions around what is a climate action plan and what does it achieve. So that allows you to go deeper depending on how much information you want. So what is the challenge for Charleston County? In 2020, the total emissions were 6.4 million metric tons. That comes to about 15.5 tons per person, which is less than the national average of 18.2 tons per person. So Charleston's already doing a bit better. Most of those emissions, or a significant share of those emissions, come from transportation, people driving around, 2.8 million tons. And then the other biggest sources are buildings, split more or less equally between commercial, industrial, and residential buildings, about 1 million tons each. That mainly comes from natural gas consumption as well as some emissions from electricity consumption. If we look at a business as usual scenario, what happens if nothing else changes, if we just kept on going as is the current practice today, which we all know is an unlikely scenario, emissions more or less flatline out until 2050, despite population growth. So we're looking at about 100,000 additional people coming to Charleston County over that period. We then figured out how can we reduce as many actions or as many emissions as possible, and we get down to 380,000 tons when we do that, a reduction of 94% by 2050. And these are the big areas that reduce those emissions: circular economy, innovation in industrial and agricultural sectors, clean energy, sustainable and inclusive transportation, and affordable and resilient buildings. And there's specific actions that are modeled within each of those categories to get there. What kind of impact do those have? So in 2023, households and businesses spent $1.7 billion in energy in Charleston County. So that's money that's primarily flowing out of the county. And so anything that we can do to increase efficiency or generate that locally recycles that money within the county and creates new economic opportunity. And when we analyze the pathway, we are able to quantify the financial impacts of that pathway on the community as a whole. And this is on the community. This is not the county as an organization. And we look at what kind of investments are required to make that happen and what kind of savings result. And the savings exceed the investments on an annual basis in 2035 and over the whole period. Investments are around $500 million per year on average. And many of those investments are already occurring. And in fact, the $500 million is about 1.5% of Charleston County's GDP of $34.5 billion. And a study that was just released found that 0.5% of that is already happening. So that's already people buying electric vehicles and heat pumps and solar systems and businesses buying all of those things. So a lot of this is already underway in terms of momentum, which is really exciting news. So much of the savings come from energy costs. So the system that we're looking at under the low carbon scenario uses half as much energy as current day to do the same work. And that's because a lot of the technologies are much more efficient in the future than they are today. Going back to the IRA opportunity, we looked at just the possibilities for households. So there's other grant and incentive programs, but just for households, we found $150 million a year in opportunities from IRA for incentives and grants that could be mobilized for Charleston County. And again, that's already underway. There was just a report released by the IRS, I think, that's found that 40,000 people in the U.S. have already, or 40,000 households in South Carolina, rather, have already taken advantage of these grants. So people are already engaged, but not necessarily from an equity perspective. when the scenario is implemented, household energy expenditures go down. And this is really important for households which are experiencing an energy burden or energy poverty. It also generates about 3,400 jobs per year. All of those investments basically stimulate new jobs. We looked at equity extensively, and you'll see in the report a spatial analysis of equity within the county against multiple different types of indicators. This sort of highlights some of the key findings. Reduced energy consumption reduces household energy costs, which allows families to make better decisions about where to spend money, not trade-offs between spending on food versus energy, for example. Improves indoor air quality and comfort, increases travel options, reduces exposure to air pollution, particularly from combusting gasoline and natural gas or diesel, which goes right to children when they're walking on a street, for example. And it stimulates new job and business opportunities. How do you make all this happen? We outlined the 5 big moves. There's 11 strategies within those big moves, and then there's 53 recommended actions. And those actions are for the county, but also for other partners. And so since the last presentation, there was a public survey on the draft climate action plan. There were 59 surveys that were completed. Most were supportive. There was a small group that did not support climate action, citing reasons like costs, government interference, and personal values. Many other jurisdictions have completed climate action plans or are completing them. You'll see a summary of those on the screen of neighboring municipalities. And then the counties continued to work on these issues. There's a number of examples here, including purchasing 2 Nissan Leafs, participating in or aiming to participate in the state's Solar for All program, hosting food waste drop-off sites, installing EV chargers, purchasing an EV truck, and also exploring energy performance contracting for the state or for the county buildings. And that is the summary. Thank you very much, and open to any questions.
Questions?
Go ahead.
Mr. Moody?
I'll follow you, Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert. I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me individually. We got this big shiny book, but it boils down to the big move pages, as I understand it. And I'm satisfied that these moves, there's no mandates in there. It's very open-ended for the county. It lets us make decisions. It doesn't say you shall, you will, you must. And it opens the door for federal dollars too, so that's always a good thing too. So I'm satisfied with the way these big move pages shook out.
I guess. Sure.
Mr. Kowalski?
Thank you for your time, your expertise, and what everybody put into this. And I just ask, when we think about what's happening and will happen in Charleston in the future, my primary, what I think, speaking for myself, I'm one person, is the rising sea levels that we know is coming, and that would be in the glaciers and everything that's melting. We know that we're going to have flooding in Charleston, and I would have liked to have seen, if whatever you call it, I would call it rising sea levels and coastal flooding, that we focus almost entirely on that, because that's what impacts our quality of life. And I know that a primary part of this is to retrofit the county buildings and to buy electric vehicles. And I researched, and I think that there's an estimated, according to there's 198,768 units, buildings in Charleston County. And I did the traffic count of, hundreds of thousands is from the Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester County of Governments, and it has traffic counts or annualized average daily traffic counts. Each count represents the average amount of vehicular traffic in both directions, which passes a given point over a 24-hour period on a typical day of the year. And it has that for Charleston County, hundreds of thousands of cars. And I asked, if we're going to use county resources, wouldn't it be best to focus on the flooding and the rise in sea levels to protect our future? And I just suggest that with the retrofitting, if we have almost 200,000 buildings, hundreds of thousands of cars, how will retrofitting our cars in county buildings, affect that overall thing? Isn't that more of a legislative matter for our Congress or state legislature? And again, we have, we have 995, the Morrison Drive. We have 8 stories there, 8 acres. We're going to build an 8-story building. All the cost and energy going into construction offsets this. Wouldn't it be better if we put 8 acres and put a forest there to help absorb flooding and help with native grasses everywhere I look in Charleston over the last 10 years, everywhere close to the water where it's flat, whether it's by the bridges, we put in big concrete things, impervious surfaces, which to me it's like the emperor has no clothes. We know coastal flooding is increasing. We know that's our future, and we put concrete and buildings right there. Wouldn't that be a priority of all of our money and resources to focus on buying land and putting absorption areas around our perimeters to deal with coastal flooding? I just see that as our catastrophic future, and we experienced a little bit about that later. And I just ask if I would have, and I appreciate all the work of everybody, especially Councilman Middleton on this and the great work on this. But for me, the great danger we have facing us is coastal flooding. My district is, the longest along the coast, the city of Charleston, and all the other areas. And that is our catastrophic future unless we adapt to that. And I would suggest we take dramatic measures, and I would hope we reconsider the Morrison Drive thing and convert that into, if we're going to contribute something to Charleston, that would be to put absorption, and that's 8 acres absorbing, and we can use that as a role model and continue. That would do more for our future than retrofitting a few buildings in Charleston County and a few of our cars. Not that that's not a good effort, but in the overall scheme of things, with almost 200,000 units and hundreds of thousands of cars, I don't see that in of itself focusing on the flooding that we know is our future, and we had a little taste of that lately. Now, I'd prefer to do this through looking for ways to absorb the flooding and deal with the flooding we know is coming as our biggest problem as we face in the future from the issues you're addressing. But having said that, I thank you for your time, and that's what I wanted to say. Thank you, sir.
Reverend Middleton?
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Herbert, and certainly for our county. Again, the county has been very proactive in resilience and sustainability, and has created offices and departments in order to combat that. The state itself has incentivized counties, municipalities to do exactly what we're doing now. Can you scroll back several slides, because I would like to go to particular slides that may speak to some of what Mr. Kabrowski is saying as it relates to, well, this is probably, can you scroll back a slide or two more? Those would have been the slide. So go back. So it's not one thing, right? So you're talking about adaptation, you're talking about just flood mitigation. That's one thing, right? It's all of the above. So when you talk about these 5 big moves, so it's talk about affordable, resilient buildings, that's one thing. And you're talking about 995 Morrison, every county building, and particularly any constructed building, surfaces, those type things. Beat this horse to death over the last years that I've been here. I was the sponsor of this climate action resolution, sustainable and inclusive transportation. Again, CARTA has gone to an emission-friendly, zero-emission bus fleet, and they're still rolling today. We've piloted electric vehicles right here in the county, and they're still they're being charged. There are more charging stations. They're powered, and they're going throughout our entire county, servicing just like the gas guzzling vehicles that some people choose to use. Clean energy for all, innovative industrial and agricultural sector, circular. So it's all of the above, right? And so they're not sinking all of the eggs in any one basket, but it becomes an approach that requires strategies in all of these areas in order to combat the big problem. You know, just looking at rising sea levels as glaciers, as you mentioned,
Or icebergs, I'm
or
sorry.
icebergs continue to melt.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
You're whatever. I'm just saying, one particular area of mitigation is not going to solve the problem. I heard the word global, right? Global. It's not just Charleston County. This is happening across the world. There were Dutch dialogues in Charleston that I participated in where the Dutch came to Charleston and met with the city and explained what they did in order to mitigate. And that's not in America, right? And so the state government, through its own initiatives, through federal dollars and other things, have incentivized municipalities, local governments to do the same thing. So it's not one magic thing that's going to fix any of this. It requires a strategic approach. It requires an action plan. It requires big moves, because if we don't do something, doing nothing is certainly not going to solve the problem.
Thank you.
Mr. Boykin?
Mine's just a comment. Mr. Herbert, on behalf of myself and the Resilience and Sustainability Advisory Committee, we would like to thank you for your hard work, the work of your firm. You produced an excellent product that's comprehensive, it's on point, and again, thank you for your excellent work.
Mr. Pryor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with all that's been said. I think Mr. Moody said it best. We've studied, we've made changes, we've studied, we've made changes, and so it's time for us to move forward. So I'm going to ask that we approve this plan as written and move it forward, because I'm tired of studying the study.
Second.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I will also say that.
Let's let everybody talk, then we'll have a vote.
I think I have more of a practical question to follow up on moving forward. I look at this and, I see you've highlighted sort of the unique moment we're in with the IRA and, some other federal monies that are available. And so when I look at a list of 53 items within those big moves, the thing I'm trying to think through is like, how are we going to prioritize these? And it seems to me that if the IRA is only going to be available for a few years, the most efficient thing would be to make sure that our first couple of priorities are the ones that are going to allow us to cut down, I don't remember the colors of the slide, but basically to make sure that some of that IRA money is used in those investments. And so I see number 17, the IRA concierge. Just curious if you have any thoughts on, what are the items here that probably beyond that one that are specifically either designed for or have the potential to help Charleston County, secure as much of that funding as possible. Not necessarily the county itself, but folks throughout the county.
I think mobilizing households to take advantage of the tax incentives and grants, which will be coming through the state as well, as quickly as possible is the big opportunity, not necessarily to get the most money, but to give the most benefit to households, particularly from an equity perspective. So helping people to go through that process as efficiently and effectively as possible. And even the program that was presented before this on housing looked like it had some ingredients that could directly overlap to support that activity. But that's the thing that really could make a big difference. There's certainly many other strategies around clean electricity and funding available for renewable co-ops. There's going to be a major announcement today around, I think, a $7 billion announcement for co-op, renewable energy investments in co-ops. And I know there's a number of electricity co-ops in Charleston County already. So those, like, just being on that as a county to make sure those opportunities are like exactly what you say, being leveraged to the maximum possibility for whoever the relevant participants are. But I think the the weatherization and clean energy and electric vehicles incentives are really significant.
Okay.
And they're not being, the adoption rate is relatively low here so far compared to other jurisdictions. So it's a big opening.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thank you again for all your work on this, and, yeah.
Anyone else? Anyone else? This item on our agenda tonight was a presentation. It was not a request to consider. Ms. Ham, would we need unanimous consent, or what would we need to do to be able to vote on this tonight?
So this is on the agenda for presentation only. If you intended to vote, then you would need unanimous consent to amend the agenda and to be able to take action.
I move to approve unanimous consent to amend the agenda to
Well,
take
hold on before you
action.
do that. Hold on before you do that. Under Robert's rules, even though it says presentation, if a board member, a council member makes a motion and it's seconded, then the majority can move this forward. Now, well,
Or in
I've
the
I've done it
we've
over
done
the
it.
last 20 years plus, and so, under Robert's rules, read the rules, under council's rules, we can move this forward, even though it's a presentation, but if the majority wants to move it forward, they have a right to do that.
It's been moved and seconded. I believe it was moved by Mr. Pryor and seconded by Mr.
Yes, sir.
Moody.
Yes, sir. But Middleton.
Mr. Middleton? Okay, that's what I thought.
But it's the other Moody. It's okay.
Okay. Mr. Moody?
I'm sorry I didn't ask this question. Climate anxiety, can you define that for me?
Worried about the future. And it's a psychological condition that's showing up more and more.
That's my problem.
Thank you.
Well, we heard about glaciers and icebergs, right?
I'm worried about the future.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Does that count, Madam Clerk?
I think only Mr. Kabrowski voted against it,
Thank you.
as far as I saw.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Herbert. Great presentation. Good work. I like how it's all laid out.
Can I ask Mr. Kabrowski?
Very methodical, very-
Maybe inappropriate. Did you ever meet with the group before any of these presentations?
No.
Did you ever meet with them individually?
Thing?
Ever met with them? That's the one question that I'm asking. Yes or no? It's just a yes or no.
I have not met with them.
Thank you so
several-
much.
But
Thank
now
you
that
very-
you've asked.
Thank
it,
you so much.
I get to respond if you ask me a question.
Thank you very much. No, I just wanted to ask that
Well, if
question.
you got to ask me a question, I feel again, my concern is the biggest problem we have in Charleston County is coastal flooding. And I think as opposed to addressing global problems, we should focus on what we're facing here in Charleston County. And we're facing catastrophic coastal flooding in our future. And I believe that that's what we should be focused on, and I don't think that this did that.
Thank you,
And that
Mr.
was the
Kabrowski.
basis of my
Mr.
vote.
Kabrowski?
Also, Mr. Chair, speaking of big problems, and I don't think it's big problems, but certainly when we have opportunity as council persons to meet individually with staff persons, with committees, with groups that have been formed in order to inform us so that we can then bring all of these things to them in the time frame. And, this has been going on for years, but certainly this year alone, the offices have been begging us, to meet with them. These folk have come in, flown in multiple times. And so all of these things, certainly as it relates to, getting more information, asking questions, being more specific so that they could tailor. Mr. Moody had his book tabbed up. They went through certain components. We pulled certain things out as opposed to language, as it relates to language, to make certain that it's palatable for everyone, didn't change the overall, tenor of the intentions moving forward. But, we have that opportunity, and I would just like to put that on the record, that I think that when we have these opportunities to educate ourselves and to also give input in the process, we should take full advantage of that. And when we come up here, meaning just in the council, committee, and council meeting setting, and acting as if this is the first time we've been exposed, and this is the only time we can provide input, it is disingenuous. And so I just wanted to at least say that, because if we have not met with them, we have robbed ourselves of the opportunity to truly interact with the process.
I would remind you, we're 9 members.
Can we move on?
I
and
get
that's
the
do the
if
business of
he's
the people?
personally
Kabrowski.
attacking my motives and stuff,
Debate
I
this.
can't respond briefly. Again,
Go ahead, Mr. Kabrowski.
okay, we're here, independent
Make it
thinkers.
short.
And again, as I saw this, I'm not here to virtual signal. I'm not here to say that we're solving a global problem. We have a local problem, and I read this at length. We have the book, and I've studied this at length, and I believe we're attempting to address a global problem when we have a singular problem here of coastal flooding, and I don't think that it adequately addresses that. And that's my feeling. Nothing that you say is going to change that. Thank you for your time.
Flooding is one element of the overarching problem. That's why we need an entire climate action plan.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
We do. We have an entire action plan. There are lots of parts to it. There's lots of places in here that a difference can be made, and that we can tweak things and make things better. So thank you all for your vote.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you, everybody.
Thank you so
For your
much.
patience. Thank you all for the work. We appreciate it, and thank you for putting it in such form that it's easy to understand. Thank you so much. Our next item
Move
is...
for approval on 3A.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded for 3A and 3B. Thank you. Number 4, consent order.
Got to vote.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so much.
Move
Yes,
for
sir.
consent agenda, approval A
Second.
through G.
G, Mr. Pryor, seconded by Mr. Middleton. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Approval on 5A.
Moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Mr. Boykin. Any discussions on 5A? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Number 6, boards and commissions.
So would that count?
Pardon me?
I was wondering, is that?
I got moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Mr. Boykin. Everyone in favor, Mr. Kabrowski voted nay.
Thank you.
Boards and commissions, Disabilities and Special Needs Board, 3 appointments. All right, everybody who wants to lead off, Mr. Werman?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Sharp. Are we going to
I'm
take
sorry, we have to
nominations?
nominate him, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'll follow your lead.
He just wants me to call him for 6C.
Okay, I'm sorry. Who's been nominated? Mr. Sharp?
Mr. Chair, I would nominate Mr. McLaughlin.
Okay.
And I nominate Ms. Charlotte Gray. I move that nominations be closed.
I've got one. I was going to nominate the Itzkowitz, is that how you said it? It's Itzkowitz.
Okay, so Gray, Itkowitz, McLaughlin, and Sharp have been nominated. Pardon me? And Whit Jones?
Is he not one of them?
Are you nominating him?
I don't think he's been nominated.
Okay.
Are you nominating him?
Are you nominating?
He was from,
Yes or no? sir?
yes.
Okay. Okay, all 5 have been nominated. We need 3 from each one of you?
Yes.
Madam Clerk?
So I'll call the roll, and you tell me the 3 people you are voting for. Mr. Boykin,
Gray, McLaughlin, and Sharp.
Mr. Darby is absent, Ms. Honeycutt,
Sharp, McLaughlin, Iskowitz.
Mr. Kabrowski.
Planning on these?
He's going to call in on 6C.
Sharp, McLaughlin, and Jones.
Sharp, Jones, McLaughlin. Mr. Middleton,
Gray, McLaughlin, Sharp.
Mr. Moody,
Sharp, Itzkowitz, McLaughlin.
Mr. Pryor,
Gray, McLaughlin, and Shaw.
Warman,
Gray, McLaughlin, Itzkowitz.
Mr. Sass.
Gray, McLaughlin, and Sharp.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the nominees are Gray with 5 votes, McLaughlin with 8 votes. I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and Sharp with 7. I'm sorry, 7 votes. Gray, McLaughlin, and Sharp.
Great, thank you very much. Next one is Housing and Redevelopment Authority.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Hummel.
Okay. Mr. Hummel has been nominated. Any others?
right, I'm good. I move the nomination be closed.
Second.
I believe Mr. Hummel is the only one nominated, and there's one appointment, so Mr. Hummel is gonna sole appointed. Thank you all. Okay. Next one.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sharp wants to say something, or? Yes, absolutely.
Good seeing you, Brett.
Thank you. The next one is Charleston County Parks and Recreation Commission.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to nominate Ms. King, and then I'd like to nominate Jason Michael from the floor.
I don't see him on there. What was that second name?
Michael.
Jason Michael.
He's applied several times.
She's
I'm
calling
sorry, I'm
Mr.
trying
Darby.
to get Mr. Darby. I don't get Mr. Darby. Do you
I'd
have
like to
a-
nominate Ms. Muley and Ms. Lieber.
Muley. Oh, here's Mr. Darby calling back. Hi, Mr. Darby.
So you nominated
Okay,
Ms.
I'm going to put you on
Muley
speakerphone. We're
and
on
Lieber.
item 6C, which is appointments to Parks and
I'd like to
Recreation
nominate
Commission.
Keen McLaughlin.
Okay, I have Mr. Darby on speakerphone. He wants to
Any-
participate in this.
Any further nominations?
I need a repeat of what the nominations were.
Ms. King,
Okay,
Ms. Lieber,
okay,
Keen McLaughlin,
okay.
Meriwether Muley. I believe that was it.
Jason Michael was
Jason
nominated
Michael.
from the
I
floor.
got that, okay.
So, didn't McLaughlin just got appointed to something just now? Different. Okay, I know the name came out.
And Mr. Pryor's just nominating him from the floor.
Oh,
He
okay,
applied in the past.
okay, all right.
Okay, Mr. Darby, the nominees are Jason Michael, Meriwether Muley, Keen McLaughlin, Suzanne Lieber, and Lisa King, just so you'll know.
Okay.
All right.
How many can I vote for?
When I get to you,
Okay.
you can vote for 2 people.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes,
Thank you.
sir. Okay. Mr. Boykin,
King and Lieber.
Mr. Darby.
Michael and King.
Okay. Mrs. Honeycutt,
Muley and McLaughlin.
Mr. Kabrowski,
Lieber and Muley.
Mr. Middleton,
Michael.
King and Michael, Mr. Moody,
Muley only.
okay. Mr. Pryor,
King, Michael.
okay. Mr. Werman,
King McLaughlin.
McLaughlin, Mr. Sass,
Muley, and King.
King. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Clerk,
Hang on 1 second. 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for King. 2 for McLaughlin. 1, 2, 3, 4 for Muley. Okay. Are you changing your vote? Okay,
to Michael and McLaughlin.
okay. Werman is changing to
Who did he vote?
Michael McLaughlin and not King. Okay. So that makes 1, 2, 3, 4. 4.
Now we have a tie.
Yep. So that gives us 3 people for 2 seats. Ms. King got 5 votes. Ms. Meriwether got 4 votes, and Mr. Michael got 4 votes.
Ms. King moves on.
Ms. King moves on. And Ms. King moves on, I think, as the
Yeah, vote getter.
definite nominee, and then on Tuesday, you can choose between King and Muley.
No,
I
Michael
mean,
and
not King, Muley,
Michael and
Michael and Muley.
Muley, I'm sorry.
I think that's how we've
Yeah,
done it in the
that's how we've
past,
done
if
it.
that's
Yeah.
what works for y'all.
But I don't think it's fair to change a vote once you know when they're all in.
Okay, Mr. Darby, we're finished with 6C.
Okay.
Did you want to participate further?
No, ma'am.
Okay, yes, sir. Goodbye.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, bye-bye.
Okay, next item, ARPA initiative.
Move for approval A and B.
Second. Moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Mr. Middleton. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Number 8, public
Move for
service.
approval items A, B, and C.
Second.
So we doing the
Honeycutt,
presentation?
seconded by Mr. Moody. Middleton,
Is
sorry.
that for all three?
Right, they are presentations.
There is action on them. No?
Mr. Chair, C is an award of.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's have the presentations. You're correct. We gotta change that.
Okay, good evening, Council. My name is Alex Oziak. I'm the Capital Programs Manager with Public Works. I'm here this evening to provide you with an update regarding the Central Park and Riverland Drive project. As you may remember, this was presented to the committee back in March, at which time it was requested that staff revisit the project scope to reduce the right-of-way impacts to the project. Working with our consultant engineer, we developed an option which drastically reduced the right-of-way from 19 parcels down to 6 and presented that to you back in June. At the direction of council, we have sent letters to those 19 impacted property owners to ascertain their support for the revised project, which I'll touch on later on in this presentation. First, I just want to start with a brief presentation of the original project design that was presented back in March. This was to provide a 8-foot shared multi-use path along Riverland Drive. In order to avoid impacts to the grand live oak trees, we were having to bifurcate the path behind those trees, which resulted in the property impacts. And then that path would shift down to a 10-foot multi-use path once it hit the county property at the end of the project. Following feedback from council at the March presentation, we worked with our consultant to make some scope changes to reduce the right-of-way and also incorporate some drainage improvements. That led us to the current design shown here, where we'd still construct a small section of 8-foot multi-use path to connect up with the project at Woodland Shores. At that point, you'd have a crosswalk to cross the street onto Riverland Drive, where the majority of the existing 4-foot sidewalk would remain in place with no impacts to those existing property owners. We would start constructing a new 5-foot wide sidewalk once you hit Lucky Road. That would continue down south past Bradham, where we'd still have 4 private property impacts right there south of Bradham, where we'd then transition to the county property, move back to the 10-foot shared use path. This slide here shows a zoom in on those 4 impacted property owners. I was able to get feedback from all 4 of them except for the HOA community there, Terra Brook. The other 3 property owners have responded they are in support of the project. The one on the corner there was parcel 36. Ms. Walker was also concerned about some drainage impacts to her property. After talking with her and explaining some of the improvements we were going to make that should help alleviate some of the flooding issues, she seemed to be in support of the project. This was just a touch real quick on those feedback we got from the property owners. Only 3 of the ones we are no longer impacting ended up responding. I'm assuming the others, since we're no longer impacting their property, were okay with the project as presented. And this is just a graphic showing those impacted property owners. Those highlighted in green were the ones who responded. And then lastly, speaking about those impacts and the drainage improvements at Bradham Road, will result in an additional live oak impact that would have to be removed. We also have 5 other grand tree impacts with the right turn lane at Central Park Road. And then some of our next steps, obviously we want to receive that approval so we continue on with our revised design with the lessened right-of-way impacts. At that point, we'd go ahead and revise our design. Exact right-of-way impacts would be determined. We'd update those property appraisals, provide those to the landowners, acquire the necessary right-of-way the 4th quarter of this year, and then we'd be in position to advertise the project about middle of 2025. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. This project has been one that I've been working on since I got on council, and I think through significant public input and a lot of revision and going back and forth to the community, we have come up with a really important solution to what is a very unsafe condition right now. And so I would like to, in the same vein that we just did, vote to move this forward under the current design that
Second.
you have presented.
Second.
I don't actually need a motion on that
Sorry,
tonight.
yeah.
That's already the Finance Committee recommendation.
You don't have to
The council
approve
now?
it.
The last time this was on your Finance Committee, you made that recommendation.
Okay.
And you said you didn't want it to go to county council until staff had engaged the community. So that was the recommendation, not to bring it back until
So this will
staff
come
had
Tuesday.
engaged the community. So it'll come back
Gotcha.
Tuesday.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And thank y'all so much. I know y'all felt that we were being hard, but y'all got it done. You just got to keep fighting until you find a way, and I really appreciate it because I know the residents will appreciate what y'all done.
Did you want to say something? Mr. Boykin had a comment.
Oh, Mr. Boyd, sorry.
Mr. Ozak, just from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I mean, we've sat and met over this and worked back and forth with those residents down there, which are in my district. You know, I just can't thank y'all enough for putting all the extra hard work and effort into getting a fair and safe resolution.
Certainly.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, thank you. 8B, Main Road, Segment C.
All right, so good evening. Again, we'll give you some updates on our main road, Segment C. We recently had a public meeting back in May. Before I dive into that, I just want to provide some brief background on the project. This was originally included in the 2016 Transportation Sales Tax Referendum. It was originally part of a larger main road project which would provide improvements to Main Road from Bees Ferry all the way down to Betsy Carson Parkway. The original project was over 14 miles in length, and in order to facilitate the environmental permitting process, we ended up splitting this into 3 different projects, with Segment A running from Bees Ferry to River Road, which includes the flyovers at US 17, and Segment C ran from Maybank Highway down to Betsy Carson, and then Segment B was that middle segment in between those. Just also wanted to touch real briefly on the purpose and need of the project, which was originally to relieve congestion and increase capacity on the main road and Bohicket Road between Maybank and Betsy Carson. Secondary purpose and need was also to provide some bicycle and pedestrian accommodations along that corridor. And the need for this project was obviously driven by the growth in population and employment on Johns Island. You've seen over a 50% increase in population between 2010 and 2020 based on the census, and obviously decreased mobility and increased traffic congestion and the current lack of pedestrian and bicycle accommodations on the island. Also wanted to go over briefly some public involvement history. We had our first public meeting for this project back in October or through December of 2020. That was an online meeting due to the COVID-19 outbreak. 5 alternatives were presented at that meeting, including the potential widening of River Road, Plowground Road, and even a construction of a new roadway cutting across Johns Island, in addition to the widening of Bohicket Road in place. Following further analysis and public input, 3 additional alternatives were identified, while 2 of the original alternatives were eliminated. Our second public meeting was held in late April and early May of 2022. We were presented those 6 alternatives to the public. And after further review and analysis again, we eliminated 4 of those and combined alternatives 1A and 1.6 to develop alternative 8, which was our preferred alternative and which was presented at that public meeting back in May. This is just kind of a brief slide going over those alternatives analysis and incorporating that public involvement throughout the entire process. Going back to our third public information meeting that was held back in May at St. John's Episcopal Church. This picture in the corner was taken early on in the meeting, so it really wasn't representative of the output we saw there. We had over 150 folks in attendance for the meeting. Our public comment period ended back in June 14th, and we received over 430 individual comments about the project. This graph here just kind of shows the distribution of the public comments that were received across the county, obviously mainly focused on Johns Island there, some on James Island, and also has some outliers in Somerville and Beaufort. Now this pie chart here kind of breaks down those 430 individual comments. We looked at 3 basic categories. Either they supported the project as we presented it at the meeting, You had folks who did not support the project whatsoever, and then a category which we're calling kind of the maybes, which seemed to be generally in support of improvements out there, but wanted some modifications to the project as we presented at the meeting. So you can see a little less than 25% actually fully supported the project as we had it developed. This here is a heat map kind of showing the distribution of those yes, nos, and maybes across the county. Again, mainly focused on Johns Island. And this chart here kind of shows some of the common concerns and the requested modifications that were cited by mainly the maybe responses. Impacts to trees and the natural environment are obviously one of the top concerns. There's also a fairly even distribution with other concerns about stopping the project altogether at Plowground, stopping the multi-use path at Plowground, but yet continuing intersection improvements south of there, shifting that multi-use path to the east side of the road where more residential neighborhoods are located, and then obviously concerns with business and both residential impacts with the project. We looked at summarizing and how we could potentially address some of those concerns. Our traffic projections are showing that intersections improvements are needed not only at Maybank but also at Plowground and Edenvale to provide a functional level of service in the 2045 design year. We'd have to perform some additional analysis to see what the impact would be if we ended up stopping that proposed widening at Plowground. However, that would not meet the current purpose and need of the project. We can also understand, going back to the multi-use path, suggested modification for moving that multi-use path to the east side seems to make good sense as long as we can avoid any kind of additional right-of-way impacts to residents along that corridor. And then certainly, I'm getting ahead of myself. And then also the residential and business impacts. Obviously, we're sensitive to the rights of owners out there. That corridor is very tight, and it's very difficult to provide any kind of meaningful widening of the roadway without having any kind of impacts to the businesses and residents that are out there. Tree impacts, we're obviously cognizant of the grand trees and the importance of that to the community in Johns Island. We've tried to work to avoid impacts to grand trees as much as possible. That's why we're looking at actually providing a median along the highway and having a divided roadway. We could keep a lot of those shoulder trees protected and then widen to the west side of the roadway. Right now, we're looking at impacting about 67 grand live oak trees that would have to be removed as part of the project, and another 100 larger trees, larger than 24 inches at breast height diameter, that would also have to be removed. Again, due to the limited space and the fact that some of these trees are located on the shoulder, these impacts are unavoidable. In addition to the trees, there's also concerns about impacts to the natural environment. Those impacts are summarized here on the screen. Obviously, we try to avoid those environmental impacts as much as we can. Unfortunately, in order to provide some widening and new roadways and bridges, those impacts are unavoidable. And so with that kind of wraps up my presentation. We do have the website for the project here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Oziak. This has been a difficult assignment, to say the least, I'm sure, for you guys. I will say, as the representative of the district that this project's located in, I've had extensive conversations with residents that are along the area to be impacted, business owners, homeowners, and other folks that utilize that roadway. One of the points that you made tonight, and if I understand this correctly, I've been a vocal opponent of going past Plowground Road with any widening efforts, but based upon your presentation tonight, you're stating that stopping at Plowground, stopping the widening at Plowground and not going further, this project as presented would not meet the purpose and need.
That's correct. As the purpose and need is currently stated, stopping those improvements at Plowground would not meet that.
Okay. If I may, if I can make a directive, Mr. Chair, if that is the case, could y'all go back and look at intersection improvements, turn lanes, and the like, and also sidewalks and or multi-use paths as appropriate, to see if any combination of those elements might meet the purpose and need, absent the road widening itself?
Mr.
Certainly. I think a lot of the feedback we got from residents is they'd like to see some improvements, but I think they'd like to see the project scaled back a little bit to try to reduce those impacts as much as we possibly can. So I think it's a worthwhile effort to go back, do a little more traffic analysis, and some design work to see if shrinking the project and reducing some of these improvements would still provide a benefit to the traffic.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Honeycutt?
Again, as one of the district members whose constituents are impacted by this, particularly the island communities that I represent, initially this project was incredibly popular, and those within my district were extremely supportive. And what we found here, at least based on the heat mapping and those who showed up and took the time to vote, is it's actually not as popular as it once was. And similar to what happened at Central Park and Riverland, there's a balance of communities that we have to address these needs. And really, with only 23% support of a project outright, I struggle as a representative of these communities to move forward with something that folks really don't want. As hard as we've worked on this, because we have worked on this again for years. But again, it takes some back and forth and listening to our community. I think that's what we were all elected to do. So I do appreciate staff's willingness to go back and forth on this, and the community's willingness to participate in these discussions. And I would join in the request Mr. Boykin has made and ask that you keep me posted on what comes out of that.
Certainly.
Kabrowski?
Question here is, well, too, I defer to the knowledge of the representatives who from that area. Are you saying then that we should wait till those changes are made before we proceed? Or I know this is a presentation, but does that need to be done before anything goes forward?
I mean, I think it'd behoove us to go back and take a hard look at this to see if there's any kind of reductions that can be made to the scope and typical section of the project and still provide some kind of traffic improvement and traffic relief out there. I'm sure it gets to a certain point where you get diminishing returns and, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze, so to say.
So is it premature to vote on this then, or make it?
I think it's premature to perhaps approve the project as it is currently designed. I think it's worth taking the time to take a step back and make sure we're doing the right thing.
Right. Thank you. Any
Chairman.
further? Mr. Pryor?
Steve, Maybank and Main, that intersection, are we gonna do something with that? Because, every time I go in and see my chiropractor, he wants to know what's happening, he's ready to get out of, and, he's held up, and he's a pretty, up in age gentleman. And, the way he explains it, his clients are on nerve, they don't know what's gonna happen, he don't know what's gonna happen. He wants to do some improvement, but he don't wanna do it until he finds out what we're gonna do. So is that included in this plan, or is it something separate that we can do to maybe, calm his nerves?
Mr. Pryor, that would be part of the intersection look at some of these intersections that we take a look at and see if those intersections would meet the purpose and need of the project. I do know that it keeps some people kind of in limbo a little bit. We will move as fast as we can moving forward to look at those intersections and bring it back to council after we find, if we can find a kind of a balancing point. But the thing that catches your eye on some of these projects is 17 relocations. So we get the opportunity to go back and look and see if we can reduce some of those relocations, keep those businesses in there if we can, is well worth the effort.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Final question.
Mr. Crosby?
Are there sufficient funds to pay for what we need to do from the existing sales tax, or will that have to go into the next one?
Currently, this project is funded with the second sales tax.
So no additional money would be needed?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions about 8B? Mr. Werman?
The idea is to relook at, I guess we're not voting on anything, but the idea is to relook at the intersection designs to avoid what? To avoid going past plow ground?
My directive was, the greatest impact is the road widening.
Sure.
And also the intersection improvements, but they've been done in a certain way to provide the most efficiency. And I'm looking to see if there's a compromise that would meet the purpose and need, but reduce the scale of the project so that some improvements might be made while reducing the impact.
Okay.
We finished with 8B? All right, now we move on to 8C.
This is an award of contract for,
Segment A.
For A,
Main-
for segment A.
yeah, man, 17. So this is for the design phase?
Construction.
This is do it.
Thank the Lord.
This design.
We're here. We
It's
are
ready to go.
finally here.
So, okay, so all right, good. So did we break these down into smaller sections, or are we just gonna go?
Motion?
Because when I read it, I thought it was for design, so that's 300 million.
Yes, sir.
Construction.
That is, the contract award is for 354 million and some change, but that is to go forth with the whole thing and move it forward.
So this is just a phase we voting on now, it's gonna be done in phases, or?
It's segment A, which is from Beast Ferry Road
Okay.
through to River Road,
Okay.
just across the Limehouse Bridge.
Is there a motion? If
But
we need a motion
all the way
on the
down
floor?
to Beast Ferry.
But this is gonna be done by one contractor?
Yes, sir.
It's a group.
It's a group of
Yeah, I know it's a
contractors.
group,
I'm looking
yeah,
for a motion.
To approve.
Discussion then?
Moved by Ms. Honeycutt, seconded by Mr. Boykin. Further discussion?
So y'all feel comfortable going forward with this, that it won't have no liability on us? Because I know we had some liability issues with a project this big, not being insured.
Yes, sir. We worked through those issues with the help of our legal staff, and we've got some language that's appropriate for the bonding agencies to sign off on.
My question was this still part of the second sales tax referendum?
Yes, sir. This project is being funded from the second sales tax.
Is there sufficient funding from that sales tax to complete this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
It's in your notes, Mr. Grabowski. It's in your notes. Yeah, they know that it's a second penny sales tax. Okay. Happy.
But the question was whether there was sufficient funds in that. That
Well,
was the question.
the way I read it, they said, but I was just worrying about
Are
splitting
there any
it.
further questions about 8C? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Number 9, recommendations from Special Housing Committee.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Ms. Honeycutt. Say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Do we need to have this executive session?
Yes, sir. Just, it won't be long, but before we go into executive session, I'd like to say something right quick, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad Ms. Craig is out in the audience because I wanted to make the public know this council is not about banning any books. I saw the Post and Courier did an article. I was asking Ms. Craig is to move those inappropriate books to the adult section. And if anybody else comes to her, they can go through the process and says, okay, hey, here's a process, can you look at this book? The committee looks at it, they can move it into the adult section as deemed necessary. But I don't want anybody to think that county council is in the business of banning books because it'll be this today, the Bible tomorrow,
Yeah.
This history tomorrow. We're not in that. And so when these folks come, they need to go through the entire process, through the library board process. But Ms. Craig, those 5 books that they send, I did ask that y'all put those in the adult section because they were explicit. Now, if somebody wants to go and get those books and give it to a minor out of the adult section and check it out, that's up to them. But, as a parent, a grandparent, and as a council member, that's why I contact you and ask you to move those books. But I'm not asking you to ban anything. This council ain't asked you to ban anything, but I just want that to be perfectly clear. There's a process. If you go through the process, that's fine.
So, Mr. Pryor and Mr. Chair, because I know I've been gone away for a long time based on church. I went to a conference. We have asked, so one council person has asked the executive director of the library to move 4 or 5 books. So explain this to me.
I can, after the meeting, if you want to.
But I just want to know the process because, again, this becomes something that we have to make certain that we can't be arbitrary, we can't be capricious, we can't, pick and choose even if it is our opinion individually that, something is explicit or whatever the case is. We live in a society where, individuals have free opportunity and choice, to decide on certain things. So I'm just trying to understand what we're doing.
Well, what I was asking them to do is, that was in the children's section. You didn't see it, so I think you need to see it.
Okay.
And then you can make an informed decision. I'm asking it to go back through the committee, and the committee remove these out of the children's section and put it in the adult section.
Meaning the committee on the library.
On the library board.
Yeah.
What happened is somebody came here and brought us some paperwork to look at.
Certainly.
And
Got you. Okay.
And so it wasn't a council action.
I
but
just
Mr.
wanted to
Pryor,
ask.
I think, made a
Yes.
good.
Yeah,
Because
it's not a
I hadn't-
council action.
Good talk that I think that, and I was under the impression that those kind of books were sort of put up anyway. They're not,
Opportunity to go back and look at the meetings yet, but I will go back and look at the meetings that I missed. Normally, I try to join virtually, but we were thronged with,
I'll get you a copy of those things. I'm not going to email it because I may get charged with pornography if I email it. Just want you to know.
I've been dealing with books in the
I'll-
public
I'll
school
get you a copy
library,
and let
so
you
I
look
don't
at it
think-
physically.
I've read it all at this point.
I don't
wanna
open
see
this
anything
one. I
more.
haven't read it.
But yes, I just want to make sure that we're not
If I say something I don't read it, they'll be knocking on my door.
our scope.
all right, we have an executive session
To go in executive session.
Second.
to receive
Why
legal
are we
advice,
going again?
Legal advice and a
legal
contract
advice on a contractual
and the
matter.
Hamlin Beach property.
No.
Do I hear a motion that we move?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Yeah, if I say nothing, I'm better than that. Shit.
from our attorney, and no votes were taken. Hearing nothing else, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank y'all.
Good boy.
Can you get Mr. Darby on the phone?
Yes, sir.
We go back in my office, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine.